Jim, welcome to the Mea Culpa podcast. I have been dying to get you on for a very long time. Finally,
I've been
I
playing
have
hard
the
to
great
get.
Jim Acosta with me. Jim, I want to start by just, talking about the release of Mark Fogel, the Russian prisoner, in exchange with Vladimir Putin in Russia. What I find interesting is the fact that they refuse to talk about the deal. And from somebody like Trump and Musk, who keep talking about transparency, we really have a very limited amount of transparency. What do you think is going on, considering I believe another American held in Russia is being released as we speak?
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, Michael, thanks for having me on the show. Always love talking to you. I mean, a couple of things are going on right now. First of all, it's always great when an American comes home from captivity. We have to applaud that. We have to, be thankful that an American is coming home to family members. I've covered a number of these, and it's unbelievable the amount of heartache that these families go through. But at the same time, Michael, you and I know this all too well. The devil is in the details, and we just need to know what the heck happened here and how this all came about. And Donald Trump and Elon Musk can claim until they're blue in the face that this is the most transparent administration in history and so on, and that Trump is being open and transparent about all this stuff. But if they're refusing to answer questions as to how this went down, it's obviously going to raise more questions. And obviously this falls upon members of Congress in both the House and the Senate at the Intel committee level and so on to get to the bottom of this. If exchanges were made to secure these releases, the public has a right to know.
Well, we do know that there was a gentleman, I forget his name, he was a Russian money launderer who was swapped in exchange. But the part that I just found interesting is while standing there next to Mark Fogel, and like you, I couldn't be happier, two things Trump said. And you can have a truth and an untruth at the same time. When he turned around and he said that Mark Fogel should have been released 3.5, 4 years ago, right after being taken. My question to you is, why do you think that it's happening today? And more importantly, at the same time, if the deal is so good, it's such a great deal by this administration, why not disclose the terms?
Yeah, well, I think, as Michael, Trump wants the PR benefit of these kinds of hostage releases without any of the dirty details that might sully, the overall finished product here. And, I suspect that as we find out more, in the coming days, Trump is not going to like perhaps all of those details coming out to the public. Again, as you were just saying, wonderful news, great to see an American coming home, and so on. We've seen these kinds of hostage releases in the past. We saw them take place during the Biden administration, and sometimes these can be very controversial. Brittany Griner, there was an effort made to secure her release, and of course, she was released before Paul Whelan, who had been kept in Russia longer than Brittany Griner. And these things get complicated. But the public has a right to know what went into these kinds of releases, and this one in particular, no question about it. It's always, and you know this, Michael, even with a hostage release, Trump has to make this about himself, and it is just one of the most maddening things about him.
Yeah. Well, look, you want to talk about
Yeah,
maddening. Think about the other
yeah,
day, there was that Trump Musk press conference that took place in the Oval Office with his kid climbing on his head, which again, we're talking about in the Oval Office. I have no issue if Musk is in the Oval Office and his kid is on the shoulders, but you have
sure.
a press conference for the whole world to witness as this kid is jumping up on top of his head like he's at Six Flags or something, or he's at
Yeah,
Disneyland.
he
We
thinks he's in the
saw,
Hall of Presidents or something. Maybe, I don't know.
and by the way, you don't see J.D. Vance. Everything is now Trump Musk. This is a very unusual dynamic here. But we saw this highly publicized press conference between the two where Musk was the one who was speaking about his concerns with federal workforce cuts. Now, I didn't know that we elected him in order to be either, the president, the vice president, but given your experience covering Trump, how did this press conference feel different from previous moments of public interaction between the two?
Michael, when I have been in the Oval Office with Donald Trump, it was during his first term, and there was no question as to who the president was. It was the man sitting behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office. What we saw take place yesterday was surreal beyond, I think, a lot of people's imaginations, because what it looked like, it sort of looked like the Time magazine cover the other day with Elon Musk behind the Resolute desk. I mean, depending on the angle of the camera you were looking at here, it looked like Elon Musk and Trump were behind the Resolute desk, and Elon Musk's kid. And it just raises the question, what the hell is going on in Washington right now? Why does it seem like we have two presidents? You're right, JD Vance, somebody should put him on a milk carton right now. He has to put out, these hyperbolic tweets for people to take notice of him. And it's Elon Musk who appears to be running the show. And he's taking all of these questions. What was with his outfit? He's wearing the dark MAGA hat. I've been calling it dork MAGA. Like it, give me a break. And let me ask you this, Michael. If Barack Obama or Joe Biden had invited a tech guy into the Oval Office, and into the Oval Office of the White House, and he's wearing a trucker hat and jeans and boots and so on. Remember how much grief they gave Obama for his tan suit? My God, this guy's wearing a dark MAGA baseball cap and boots and jeans in the Oval Office. Do I give that much of a rat's ass about it? I don't really care, but I mean, I just the hypocrisy is just out of this world. It's nauseating, and I think that beyond just the aesthetics of it, I think serious questions have been raised about what is Elon Musk's role. He seems to be a shadow president. He seems to be running the administration, and it should be very disconcerting to all Americans.
I mean, it's almost as if Trump is happy to have Elon there doing the job that he was elected to do, not having to pay Elon Musk, obviously, though Elon is figuring out ways to compensate himself and handsomely as well. But he has Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, providing him with all of the material for these executive orders. He has Elon Musk out there basically rummaging through all of our systems, through all the departments, chopping here, chopping there. There's no discussion, except potentially with Trump, about what's going on here. And there is a massive, massive amount of effect that this will ultimately bring to the American people, including during that same press conference, if you even want to call it that. Trump mentioned his belief in reducing the federal workforce. My question to you is, how significant do you think these cuts will be in real terms for the American worker, especially in light of rising inflation? I mean, as we've seen, for example, like the New York Times reporting that
Yeah,
right now there is a January inflation increase.
that's right. And remember, Trump said that on day one of his administration, he would start bringing down costs for the American people. I'm not sure really anybody believed that when he said it. It's sort of like, your uncle, you have to always divide by six, whatever he says. That's sort of what Donald Trump is. He just makes these claims, and, that you can't really take many of them to the bank. But you're right. The January inflation report came in. It does show inflation went up in that month, and the stock market is responding accordingly. And that hasn't even taken into account what the effects will be of these tariffs that Trump wants to push through, despite the fact that you have the Wall Street Journal and so many other folks on the right saying, "Wait a minute, we don't want to do all of this." Well, Trump ran on this during the campaign. The other thing, I mean, when you get to Elon Musk and what he was talking about in the Oval Office, Michael, I don't know what you thought, but my estimation of what Musk was saying, he just seemed to be rattling off a lot of talking points that you hear from the far right on social media. And he just seems to be copying and pasting those talking points. And in many cases, I mean, the New York Times went through a litany of them this morning. In many cases, he's just not adhering to the facts. He's just spewing out false talking points about what's been going on at these federal agencies. And so, it looks a bit like amateur hour with Elon Musk. He's getting to drive daddy's car for the first time, and he's running into the curb. He's hitting mailboxes, and he doesn't seem to know what he's doing.
Yeah, except, look, you got to give Trump a certain amount of credit for what he was successful in doing in terms of the 2024 election. He managed to bullshit the American people that on day one he was going to stop wars, not get into them, that he was
Yeah,
going to reduce the price of groceries and gasoline. Remember, he created the term groceries. And that's not what we're seeing. So while we're listening to Elon Musk putting out all of the GOP talking points, none of this is really accurate. In fact, it's to the contrary. Anybody that goes to the grocery store right now, today, will see an increase in the price of their eggs. There's also an increase in the price of milk. There's also an increase in the price of gasoline. So the three words that he ran on that I believe were instrumental in this electoral victory was gasoline and groceries. And yet they continue to spew. Now, we all know that government is inefficient. We all know that
sure.
there
Oh
is
yeah,
fraud, there's waste, there's abuse. This is not anything new to the American people. But somewhere along the line, having the richest guy in the world with a kid jumping up and down on top of his head, telling you that they have this under control, that they are slashing agencies and fraud and waste and abuse. And yet every single day, the cost to Americans to exist is increasing. How do they
yeah.
expect to sell that?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I mean, getting back to Trump during I mean, he wrote a wave of bullshit into the White House. I mean, let's just face it, when he's saying that, Haitians in Springfield, Ohio are eating cats and dogs and
Wait, Jim, that's not
all of
true?
I'm still waiting for the first cat or dog to show up on the menu somewhere. I mean, I find it astounding that that he has this sort of like Don Rickles act that he keeps going to, and it surprises me and astounds me 7 days out of the week that people still fall for this stuff. It's really unreal, but listen, Michael, I mean, if you don't laugh, you'll cry. This is uh, a presidency that is built on a foundation of lies, and he's just going to continue to do that. It is all he knows how to do. He is a one-trick POTUS, as I've called him previously, and I don't think anybody should be surprised by that. Now, as for inflation and gas prices and grocery prices, I agree with you 100%. I think that's a large reason as to why he won the election. When people are voting with their pocketbooks, the incumbents in Washington have to, run for the hills. The price of eggs, I mean, that has a lot to do with bird flu. That's been written about time and again. And so people need to understand the price of eggs is not going to come down until the government gets a handle on bird flu. Well, okay, how are the folks at the USDA, how are our federal regulators supposed to get to the bottom of this and tackle that issue, government
Mhm.
scientists and so on, when so many of them are afraid for their livelihoods right now? Seems like a really bad time to be running through these agencies with a flamethrower and scaring the dickens out of everybody.
Right,
Um,
with somebody like RFK Jr. and some of the folks
yeah,
that they're now dismantling it, whether it's the USDA or other
when you have a bunch
governmental
of
agencies.
amateurs and hacks doing all this stuff, and you need some pros in there running the show, or else, guess what, America, buckle up. We're in for a bumpy ride.
Oh, a real bumpy ride. And,
Yeah,
I understand where you call him, a one trick, pony. I would have to turn around and say, I disagree with this statement. He's actually a two trick. I mean, he's managed to do the impossible. The only way that he was going to stay out of criminal accountability, out of civil accountability, and not spend, imagine this, not spend his remaining days either in a home confinement scenario, because I don't think they'd ever put him in prison. And I wouldn't want to see a former president ever put in prison, regardless of what the crime even is. I know people will say, oh my God, why would you say that? Because as a former president, he has national security information, and he's the kind of guy who would give that information up for like a bag of tuna and a book of stamps, right? So for our own protection, just put him in a home confinement type scenario. But the only way he could avoid that is winning an election. He didn't just win the election, he won every single swing state, which goes to show
True.
you that
All true.
we Democrats actually have a lot to do. And hopefully the new head of the DNC, Jim Martin, has a better plan than Jamie Harrison had of trying to rely upon the GOP's weaknesses. Because, you said it properly, he's selling a line of bullshit, and not only his base, but a plurality of Americans are believing it. I want to go into something else.
I mean, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, you go ahead.
No, the thing that typifies it for me, Michael, almost more than anything, this Trump meme coin right before he comes into office. I mean, I will say he could sell wool coats. He could sell wool coats on the beaches of the Bahamas. I mean, he's that kind of a salesman. There's no question about it. Yeah.
I mean, but talk about some of these comments that are just, I don't want to, they're absurd. Trump recently made comments and statements about how the United States should own the Gaza Strip, which, struck many, myself included, as both confusing and very unsettling. Now, I don't care what side of the coin you are on this issue, right? It's irrelevant. The United States is going to own the Gaza? How do you interpret these types of comments in the context of, let's say, broader geopolitical tensions? And more importantly, what does this say about Trump's approach to foreign policy in general?
Yeah. I mean, you and I were talking about this on my Substack yesterday, Michael. I mean, I'm trying to figure out, is this just open mic night in the Oval Office? Is this Don Rickles and the Catskills, just ripping off one-liners, and he doesn't really understand the consequences of what he's saying? The other day he said, we're not going to put U.S. Boots on the ground, soldiers' boots on the ground to take over Gaza. Okay, well, then who the hell is going to take it over? You're getting rid of USAID, which, by the way, they've been trying to operate in Gaza and provide humanitarian relief to the people there. So who are you going to send in? The Boy Scouts? The New York Yankees? Who's going to go in and patrol Gaza and take it over? These are just words coming out of his mouth. And, when he's talking about, taking over Greenland, and you have a Republican congressman, I think his name is Buddy Carter, down in Georgia, saying we're going to call it red, white, and blue land. I mean, I'm sorry. What's going on here? Is this, open mic night, or is this the United States of America? Somebody needs to get serious here, because the credibility of the United States is on the line. I was at a function the other night with being held by one of our top U.S. allies, the ambassador. I don't want to say which country, but it was a top U.S. ally, and there were diplomats that I was speaking with at this event who were just laughing about all of this and rolling their eyes and wondering what is going on, what the hell is going on. But this is what people voted for. They voted to put this chaotic, guy back in the White House, who just isn't being very serious about the job of being president of the United States, which is why Elon Musk has so much power right now. Elon Musk knows a fool when he sees one. And the president of the United States is just yielding so much credibility right now on the world stage that I think it really could have major consequences for us. I think it's a very serious problem.
We start talking about, first of all, Trump made comments that he's going to end the Ukraine-Russia war in 24 hours. He's going to end Israel-Hamas war in 24 hours. Everything is in 24 hours, right? For whatever the reason.
Or 2 weeks.
That's his go-to line. Well, obviously, annexing Canada and these comments about making Canada the 51st state. Half my family lives in Toronto. My dad grew up in Canada after World War II. Right. Like I said, half my cousins all live in Toronto. And I'm saying to myself, that's great. Now they're going to be Americans. They don't want to be Americans. So he wants to annex Canada. He wants to annex Mexico. He wants to take back or to take over the Panama Canal. He wants to acquire Greenland or take Greenland, and he wants to now take Gaza. That sounds like potentially 5 wars to me, because I was under the impression that he was the anti-war president.
That's right.
Right. I'm just a little bit confused here when people turn around and say, well, he's living up to his promises. Well, that's true. In many cases, he is doing what he promised that he was going to do, such as pardon 1,600 January 6th defendants, right? He is living up to a lot of the things. He is going to gut government, fraud, waste, and abuse. Well, he's doing that by gutting all of government. So, he is doing what he had promised. But one of the things he also said is, let's stop wasting money on funding wars all around the world. I will put a stop to all of that. Looks like we're going to be getting into 5 more wars, which means that children who are of fighting age could easily get pulled into this thing.
Yeah. As my mother used to say, it's getting mighty deep around here and I don't have my boots on. I think, a couple of things. First of all all this talk of annexation, what does that remind you of? It reminds me of Vladimir Putin saying he wants to annex Crimea. He wants to annex parts of Ukraine. You can't just go around the world saying we want to take over this country and take over that country, especially when you're the United States of America. It just sounds, it sounds nuts.
It's
and
antithetical
of course,
to who we are.
It's antithetical to who we are in the modern era. There's no question about it. As you said, the Canadians want no part of this, although Justin Trudeau, the prime minister, has said in recent days, it was picked up on a hot mic, I believe, he thinks Trump is very serious about this. First of all, Canadians
wait, hold on, Jim. Don't you?
Yeah.
Don't you think he's serious about this?
I really don't know, Michael.
I do.
I think he's serious. I don't think he's serious about how he's going to achieve these objectives. Senator Rand Paul, where are you on all of this? You were supposed to be the guy who is against all of these endless wars. Donald Trump, during the campaign, ran ads saying he's against these endless wars. And as you said, Michael, Trump is talking about putting the United States of America in the middle of 4 or 5 different military commitments all at the same time. This is Vladimir Putin on steroids and maybe some meth while you're at it. It just does not sound like the ramblings of a rational person. And so I just wonder sometimes, is it just open mic night? And this is just stuff popping out of his mouth without any thought or consideration as to how he's going to get it all done. Canada has national health care. They don't want to go to be thrust into the American system of health care, where United Healthcare is the 5th largest company in the United States. They don't want to be a part of that. They like having the system that they have up in Canada. Is it perfect? No. We don't need to have that kind of conversation.
When your car breaks down, you take it to a mechanic with no hesitation. You need it, and it's not something most guys can fix themselves. I know I can't. And men should think the exact same way about ED. But the reality is, you might be hesitant to seek help. Thankfully, through HIMSS, you can get access to personalized ED treatment without stepping outside the door. HIMSS is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your own couch. HIMSS provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. You hear that? 95% cheaper. And the process, it's 100% online. so that there's no need for uncomfortable doctor visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option for you. And if prescribed, your medication ships directly to you for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. And with hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, HIMS can help you find the ED option that works best for you. So start your free online visit today at hims.com/Cohen. That's HIMS.com/Cohen for your personalized ED treatment options. Again, that's hims.com/Cohen. And the product mentioned are chewable compound products which are not approved by or verified by safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
But they seem pretty content up there, just the way they are. And by the way, Michael, when we're talking about major U.S. allies, Canada is at the top of the list. Canada has fought shoulder to shoulder with the United States of America in the years since 9/11. This is how we treat our friends. This is how we treat our major allies, by saying we want to annex them. Give me a break.
Yeah, and I think the whole conversation is just dangerous. But, not to give you a history lesson, but this isn't the first time in world history that we have seen these sort of annexations take place. Remember, that's
Correct.
how kings were made, right? They would
Yes.
annex the neighboring territory and then grow the territory that way, starting like with Napoleon Bonaparte. Right? Adolf Hitler tried to do the same shit. Vladimir Putin with the annexation of Crimea, going into the country of Georgia, right? Gruznia, and now trying to take over all of Ukraine. And after Ukraine, what's next? Poland, right? To reassemble the former USSR? I don't know. But one of the other comments that came out of Trump's mouth, which I also found very interesting, was the comments that they weren't even going to, once we owned the Gaza and rebuilt it with beautiful multi-million-dollar homes on the waterfront, followed by business and all that they're not even going to have the Gazans return to this land, right? And he wants to relocate all of the Gazans to either Jordan or to Egypt. Now, the other day he had King Abdullah of Jordan in the Oval Office, and obviously following these comments about Gaza and the Gazans and putting them in Jordan and in Egypt, King Abdullah came out strongly against Trump's proposal to relocate the Palestinians there,
Correct.
calling
That's
it,
right.
and here's exactly what he said: unacceptable. You think that Trump's comments...
Saudi Arabia doesn't want it either.
Well, and by the way, so I have a very dear friend who lives in Jordan, and was born
Yeah.
there, came to the United States, and so we became friends, but then relocated back with his family there several years ago. And I speak to him on a very regular basis. And he said that the country of Jordan had this once before, where they had Palestinians relocated, and it was a disaster for them, which is, of course, why King Abdullah is saying it is unacceptable. You think
Yeah.
that these comments are a deliberate provocation, or was Trump just completely out of his depth in discussing such a complex issue about the rebuilding? See, he sees it as a transaction. Trump is very transactional. This is a real estate deal to him, right? This has nothing to do with relocating the people in a building that, has or needs to be torn down. He just wants everybody out, a blank canvas. By the way, it's not a small piece of real estate. We're talking about 170 square miles. It's twice the
Correct.
size of
That's right.
Washington, D.C. So this is a
Yeah.
real complex issue. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, he's talking about turning Gaza into Key Biscayne or something, and he needs to understand you can't treat the Palestinian people like the tenants in one of his father's high rises in Queens. It's not the same situation. And I do think, and I think you've put your finger on something, Michael. This idea, this concept that he's been talking about in the Oval Office, by the way, he's reiterated that we're going to take it over, calls into question what is going on in his head. It calls into question whether he has the right stuff to be president of the United States. You cannot be commander in chief if you're not in command of reality. And obviously, let's talk about King Abdullah of Jordan for just a moment. Perhaps the most important U.S. ally in the region, just steadfast in its support of the United States for years. Without King Abdullah, that whole region gets a lot more complicated. Obviously, our relationship and our friendship with Israel is critically important. But King Abdullah of Jordan is a major partner for peace in that region. He always has been. And so when he is shaking his head and saying, I don't know what the hell this guy is talking about, I think people need to pay attention. And I've been, again, talking to folks in the diplomatic community here in Washington, talking to folks who cover this very closely among journalists. People do not know what the hell Donald Trump is talking about as it relates to Gaza. You cannot, engage in ethnic cleansing and moving a whole population of people out of a region to build a golf resort. That's nutty. That's bonkers. It's otherworldly stuff. And at some point, the grown-ups up on Capitol Hill and in the Senate and on the Republican side of the aisle need to call down the 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and say, knock it off. And remember that picture we saw the other day of Susie Wiles, Michael, and she's looking at Trump like, what? She had sort of the Debbie Burks look in her eyes when Trump was talking about injecting yourselves with disinfectants and so on. People just don't know what the hell he's talking about.
Or shoving that UV light up your ass in order to,
Right.
To burn out all of the COVID. What do you call it? The disease.
Yeah, that idea about Gaza more than anything else sounds like somebody's gone off the deep end. We're almost, Greenland, bonkers stuff. Canada, bonkers. Panama Canal, the fact that he said it to the inauguration, bonkers. But this idea of turning Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East, to me, calls into question what is going on, what is happening inside of his head.
But it's okay. So let's say something is happening inside of his head, and let's say it's just not. He's always had these sort of grandiose, somewhat unrealistic ideas.
Yeah.
But there was always people like myself around him that would say to him, you just can't do that. Right. And he would actually consider it. He would vociferate over it. He would ask a million people questions about it and then ultimately make a decision. Many times it would remain this initial thought, but many times he would change course. There is no one around him steering this boat straight. Why? I don't know. Why not if you're Susie Wiles? Why if you're not, any of the other individuals that are around him? Just say, Mr. President, you can't do this. Think about the impact that this remark is going to have on U.S. Middle Eastern relations, particularly with the Arab nations like Jordan, like Saudi, like the Emiratis, like Iran, like Syria.
Yeah.
Think about that, and let's come up with a remark that benefits the region, but also you as the most powerful person in the United States in the entire world. And I would say to him, here's the comment that you should be putting out there. And it would be brought up by not just all Americans, but by the world. Gaza right now is in ruins. It is uninhabitable. And it would be wrong for the United States. It would be wrong for any country in the world to allow the Palestinian people to continue to live in that type of an environment. There's no running water. There's no sewage. There are no homes. There's no groceries for food. There's no roads within which to drive on. There is nothing there that can sustain life. And as the humanitarian country that we are, it is incumbent upon us to move them out and to help to rebuild. Because this is even worse than Germany after World War II. There were sections of Germany that were completely obliterated, but not the entire country. You have 170 square miles of room. So as a humanitarian, we need to move them out and rebuild. Not even talk about how these folks are going to come back, or if you're even going to let them come back. Why even put that on the table? Nobody is guiding the ship straight.
Yeah.
And I want to know why.
I want to know why too. And, a couple of things. One, you know, it may have been Trump getting elected and the leverage he was bringing to the table that helped result in this ceasefire and this hostage release plan. Obviously, the Biden administration folks worked on it as well. But you have to say perhaps Trump's election had a hand in that. If that's the case, why is he undoing it with these kinds of comments?
Right.
You're already hearing from the region that this may jeopardize this hostage release deal that was cut, the ceasefire deal that was cut. He could do a lot of good right now by just shutting the hell up. And he just can't help himself. And Michael, to the point of why can't somebody get a grip on this and tell him to stop? You know this all too well. During the first Trump administration, he would get in screaming fights with John Kelly. He would get in these kinds of shouting matches with other advisors, the grown-ups who he surrounded himself with, thank goodness, during the first Trump administration. Those kinds of restraints are not there this time around. Those kinds of grown-ups are not in the room this time around. You have Susie Wiles, who is a respected political operative in Florida. There's no question about that. She helped get him elected. But she is not a General Kelly. She's not somebody who has been on the world stage in that same kind of capacity, and may just not have the base of knowledge and the gravitas to pump the brakes in this kind of a situation. You have Marco Rubio, who is the Secretary of State, but he's really kind of given himself over to the MAGA movement and just may not have the same kind of leverage with Donald Trump that you might have had with a Marco Rubio of the past. I mean, that remains to be seen. We'll see what happens. But you don't have those kinds of, General McMaster was the national security advisor at the start of the Trump administration. Well, I guess it was Michael Flynn, but then he got the boot and then McMaster came in. You had people like McMaster. You had people like John Bolton. You had grownups and big boys and girls in the room with the president during that first administration. You just don't have as much of that this time around. And so he is going to say these outlandish things because there weren't meetings before he got out in front of the cameras where they said, please, Mr. President, do not say that. Please don't say the thing about making the Gaza Strip the Riviera of the Middle East. It's going to blow things up. And perhaps in Trump 1.0, there were folks around that were able to pump the brakes and keep him from saying those sorts of things publicly. I just don't think those folks exist this time around, or if they have the capacity to do it, they're not willing to exercise that capacity and say, stop, don't do this. What you're doing is self-destructive.
Yeah, it's not just destructive to him, it's destructive to actually the whole GOP. I mean, think
That's
about it
right.
this way, right? When Trump was successful in winning all 7 swing states. And I just want to concentrate on 2 for a second, Michigan and Pennsylvania, that have large Muslim communities. Muslim voters in these 2 states of Michigan and Pennsylvania are enraged based upon their dissatisfaction with these comments about Gaza, about the United States owning Gaza, relocating them out of this land with the notion that they're not even welcome back. You think that this type of a backlash will impact the 2026 midterm elections and potentially provide the Democrats the congressional power that they need to put a stop to some of these executive orders that are flooding in and day out?
Yeah, I mean, Michael, I mean, a couple of things. One is you and I both know there are a couple of things that will slow Trump down. One is the stock market. If he sees what he's doing is making waves in the stock market in a highly negative way, he will pull back on occasion. And his political prospects. If it's starting to look like in the next couple of months that he's just so out of control that the polls are starting to show that public preference for the Democrats is starting to shoot up in terms of the midterms, that may get him to cool his jets a little bit. But I don't know this time around if he sees himself as kind of unaccountable. The horse is out of the barn. It can just run wild now because he doesn't have to worry about running for reelection again. I think some of this stuff where he says I'm going to keep running and running and running is just trolling.
No, no, it's
May,
not. No,
you think
no,
you think he's serious about that?
dead ass serious.
Interesting.
Yeah, dead
Interesting.
ass serious. He has
But he's
no
not making any
interest.
sense now at this age. I mean, I can't imagine in 28 what all of this is going to sound like. But
Well, it doesn't make a
I just,
difference to him.
yeah,
Name a king that has ever stepped aside, right, from power.
yeah,
I mean, we watched
yeah,
as like Ruth Bader Ginsburg refused to walk away from the Supreme Court. They just don't want to leave. He does not
yeah.
want to leave this. He enjoys being flown around on Air Force One, on
That's true.
doing
You
whatever
got a
he
point there.
wants. He
That's
has
right.
unlimited power. The whole world is
And that's
kissing
why he
his
freaked out
ass.
so much the first time around after he lost in 2020.
Right. Which he again refuses to acknowledge, going after, again, that Kamala Harris didn't even get 75 million votes, that the whole thing was rigged. If it was rigged, how did you win? I mean, again, there is nobody around him. Like when I was there saying to him, you just don't say that. Or here's a better way for you to say it that's not going to be so polarizing. But it's not just the Muslim community in Michigan and Pennsylvania that are angry at him. Now, in his own home state of Florida, Venezuelans are furious, furious. And by the way, shame on them. To be honest, and I hope some are listening right now, shame on you, because following his statements about Gaza, right, many of the Venezuelan Americans that live in Florida also expressed their disappointment and saying that they are right now feeling extremely alienated from his policies, except for the policy of ICE, of deportation, of birthright citizenship coming to an end. My question to you is, how significant is this shift in the Latino voting sentiment, especially in a swing state like Florida?
Yeah. Well, there were all these thoughts that because of the way he treated the Puerto Ricans, that the Puerto Rican vote would somehow make a huge difference in places like Florida and Pennsylvania, and that just did not come to pass.
No.
Obviously, the landscape could be different this next time around, and I think that a lot of this remains to be seen. One of the things I will tell you, Michael, because being of Cuban descent, I'm down in Miami a lot. I follow the situation closely as it relates to the Cuban American community. Uh, Down in South Florida, and this applies to the Venezuelan community there as well, there is a lot of propaganda that is pumped out of the airwaves in Spanish language radio and so on. And it is very deliberate, it is very intentional. And a lot of people who are senior citizens and so on are scared to no end by a lot of what is pumped out of Spanish language radio down there these days. Basically, what you have is a lot of MAGA people running some of these stations, and they put out a lot of disinformation. They did it during the 2024 campaign. I believe they did it during the 2022 campaign, where they just try to scare elderly people to no end and say, Joe Biden is a socialist, Kamala Harris is a socialist. What does that do? That pushes people's buttons. If you are a Venezuelan, if you're a Cuban, and you hear that over and over again on Spanish language radio or Spanish language TV, it really can have a psychological effect. And I think that has been happening to a large extent. I do think in the Hispanic community, like you see in other communities, people also responded to inflation. People also responded to problems in the economy. And a lot of people voted with their pocketbooks last time around. But there's no question about it, Michael. When at the RNC, they're holding up signs that say mass deportations now, if you are of Venezuelan descent, if you're of Cuban descent, if you're of Mexican descent, you ought to understand that those signs apply to you too, that they're
Yep.
not going to do carve outs for political reasons here and there, like you might think. They're going to come after abuela. They're going to come after members of your family if they are undocumented. It doesn't matter if you're a mixed status family and you have U.S. citizens in the household as well as undocumented people in the household. You saw Tom Homan, the border czar, say publicly, "Well, we'll just deport the whole family." How does that sound? I do think that there was some wish casting, as you called it, I think on my show, sane washing during the 2024 campaign, where people just did not want to deal with the reality of what Trump wants to accomplish when it comes to these mass deportations. Apparently, he's already hit the roof that the numbers aren't high enough, even though they're starting to build a detention camp in Guantanamo, for Pete's sake. You're going to take migrants and you're going to deport them to Guantanamo to put on a dog and pony show. That to
Yes,
me
he will.
seems very inhumane. It seems very inhumane to me. And you're absolutely right, Michael, that people should have been paying more attention to that during the campaign. There's no question. When they're holding up signs that say mass deportations now, and you are of a family that is mixed status, you ought to understand they are talking about you.
You know, it was funny because I was watching on CNN. I shouldn't even say the word funny because there's nothing funny about any of this. I'm watching on CNN and they had a family, a Venezuelan family, and they were all sitting around. And as you just said, they were of mixed status. And the father, who was speaking on behalf of the entire family, it must have been 7 or 8 people, from children to the grandparent. And he turns around and he goes, "Wait, I don't understand. This is not supposed to apply to me. We voted for Trump." And I would have liked whoever was interviewing this guy to turn around and say to him, "Well, what the hell did you think when they're holding up mass deportation now? That somewhere along the line, sir, that you and your family, because you're voting for Trump, is going to be immune from from the action of ICE?" And
Not going to happen.
it's, of course it's not. And he was sitting there and he was like, "I can't believe this is happening to me. I can't believe this is happening to me." Well, again, what the hell did you expect? Every now and then, we're reminded of those many healthy resolutions that we've made over the years, like to lose weight, to exercise more, to eat better. But a goal without a plan, well, it's a plan that's destined to fail. Prolon's 5-day program, it gives you the tools to put your health goals into action with a science-backed plan that makes it easy to stay focused and to achieve real results. Prolon's fasting mimicking diet, well, it's a revolutionary plant-based nutrition program that nourishes the body while making cells believe that they're fasting. Researched and developed for decades at USC's Longevity Institute and backed by leading US medical centers, Prolon helps support healthy blood sugar, enhanced skin appearance, fat loss, and improved energy and focus post-fast. Now, it all starts with their 5-day program. Snacks, soups, and beverages, all designed to keep your body in a fasting state. No guesswork and no planning required. 3 consecutive cycles of Prolon have been shown to reduce your biological age score by an average of, get a load of this, 2.5 years. And your waist circumference, by 1.5 inches. Prolon is fasting with food. That's right. It's fasting, but with food. It all starts with Prolon's 5-day program. Again, snacks, soups, beverages, all designed to make your body think that it's fasting. So let me be clear. I did the 5-day program and I feel much better. Prolon, really, it's not like any other diet that I've tried. Because you know why? It's not a diet. It's truly science. I mean, it was convenient. They sent me everything that I needed all in one box. To help you kickstart a health plan that truly works, Prolon is offering Mea Culpa with Michael Cohen listeners 15% off. You hear that? 15% off site-wide, plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day nutrition program. So go now and visit prolonlife.com/mea culpa. That's PROLONLIFE.com/mea culpa to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. That's prolonlife.com/mea culpa. Go there now. None of this should be new to anyone. They told you what they were going to do, and for whatever the reason, you whitewashed it, you sane-washed what he was saying, and you ignored it. And instead, you attacked Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as being socialist, as being cruel and not compassionate to the Hispanic, to the Muslim community here in America. And, I hate to say the old expression, right? You asked for it. Be careful when you knock on the door of the devil. Some point in time, he's going to answer. And that's really what you got going
Yeah.
on here. Well,
Yeah.
on top of
No
all of
question.
this nonsense, right? Think about this. On top of all of the nonsense that's going on, Trump announces via executive order, and I didn't know that you could even do this via executive. I'm learning a lot, in my old age, that by executive order, you can actually create a U.S. sovereign wealth fund, right? I didn't know that you were able to do this, which would allocate federal money, which I thought the allocation of federal money had to be via Congress, but not if it's by an executive order, at least according to this administration, into this sort of future fund of sorts. I don't know. You think this is feasible and effective as a long-term financial strategy? You think it's a political gimmick? Because he automatically wants to have this U.S. sovereign wealth fund own a significant interest, for example, in TikTok. The U.S. sovereign wealth fund should own the Gaza Strip. You think this is
Yeah.
legitimate, or you think this is just a gimmick?
Michael, you would know better than me, but I would certainly not go into business with Donald Trump. I would not take investment advice from Donald Trump. I would not take financial advice from Donald Trump, and I'm not sure he should be offering that kind of financial advice to the country. Look at all of the people who got stiffed by Donald Trump over the years who've gone into business with Donald Trump. This is the thing that really should concern people more than anything. If he is doing things, monkeying around in ways that puts the full faith and credit of the United States of America, confidence in our financial system, confidence in the almighty dollar, if he's putting any of that into any kind of jeopardy whatsoever, folks better grab their pocketbooks. I want to see the fine print, and I want to get out my uh, my microscope to go through it line by line, because anything that he proposes is something that needs to be you have to be careful about. Look at what's taking place right now with the idea of tariffs. He almost at the beginning of his administration, he's announcing these tariffs that he wants to go after goods coming in from Mexico and Canada. And then within 24 hours, he's reversing course on that. That sends shockwaves through the financial markets. It makes people gun shy as to whether or not they want to do business with the United States of America under a Donald Trump. And when you have the Wall Street Journal saying this is the dumbest trade war, I mean, when you're Donald Trump, you're a Republican president, you've lost the Wall Street Journal already within 2 weeks of your administration. Any kind of financial undertakings that he wants to embark on, I think you have to be very careful about.
Yeah, but let's not discount the fact that since becoming president-elect, Donald Trump
Yeah.
has made just about $5 billion since
for
becoming
himself.
president-elect,
Yeah,
for himself. For
for
himself. A
himself.
lot of
Yeah,
people will
yeah.
turn around and say, that's pretty good. I'd like to have $5 billion too. I'd like to have a portion of that.
But there are all these reports that have come out. People who got in late on the Trump meme coin may have lost their shirts, and so you have to be careful with this stuff.
Yeah, that you do. And let's talk for a quick second about these tariffs, the ones to Mexico and to Canada. He also reinstituted a 25% plus tariff on all aluminum and steel coming into this country. Now, what most people know is that Canada is a significant supplier of both of those two items. What somehow the DNC is failing to do, and this is not commercial sort of stuff that you're going to see on television. Use social media and explain. Use the Jim Acostas of the world on your. And I love your Substack, by the way. In fact, it was your Substack that got me to open one up for myself. Right?
Yeah, good,
I mean,
good, good.
I love that as a
It's a
as a
good
form
platform.
of communication. Right?
Yeah,
How about you turn around and you explain that if Canada is not selling the aluminum and the steel to the United States, where do you think they're going to sell it to? China? 100%. China will take everything. Why? Because they need it as well. And just because the United States doesn't buy it, all that means is that what we do need to buy, we're going to pay even more for it. And who ultimately gets hurt in this tariff? Wake up, America. The consumer. It's not by the distributor. It's not by the country. It's not by the supplier. It is by the consumer. The consumer ultimately gets fucked in the end. And that's how it worked in
yeah.
2017. And it's how it's going to work again in 2025. And as we sit here and we talk about, all of these promises that were made, early on in the campaign and so on, inflation continues to rise. Now, the billionaire class that seems to have surrounded themselves in this new administration, they don't care. You think they care if a dozen eggs is $50? They don't give a shit if it's 100. They have so much money, they can't spend it in 10 lifetimes. So as inflation continues to rise, particularly in things like grocery prices and gasoline costs, at least what I saw when I filled up my vehicle the other day, I'm up like 5-6% over,
Sure.
the month before. You think
Yep.
that Trump's administration failed to grasp the everyday financial struggles that Americans are currently facing? Or do you think that these recent policies are designed to help mitigate these impacts?
Michael, during the campaign, Trump seemed to display a stunning detachment from the reality of tariffs. He kept saying over and over again, "We're going to put a tariff on these countries. We're going to put a tariff on these countries. We're going to make all of this money, and it's going to do all these great things for this country." You- that it just reveals a basic misunderstanding of tariffs. The tariffs go on the products that are coming into the country. The tariffs are paid by the people who bring those products into this country, and they pass on the cost to the consumers. This has been written about time and again. You and I know this, because we read the news, and most people out there who follow the news understand this. Trump keeps playing it off as if I'm slapping a tax on the Chinese and I'm slapping a tax on the
Right,
Mexicans and the Canadians. You're not, that's not what you're doing. And he's going to keep saying it. There's no fact checking him. I mean, we can fact check him until the cows come home. He's just going to keep saying it, which is what makes it a lie. But, you know, people have to understand that there are real life and real world consequences to all of this. That is why you're seeing, and I think you're going to continue to see problems with inflation in this country. And because of that, you're going to have the Federal Reserve reluctant to lower interest rates. A lot of people have been sitting on the sidelines in the housing market because they don't want to go in and buy real estate, buy a home for their family if they're paying 6, 7, 8% interest. They're gonna want to wait until interest rates come down. So that sector becomes impacted by all of this. Trump thinks he can solve that by putting pressure on Jay Powell, over the chairman of the Federal Reserve, but then that's going to get into a whole conversation about whether or not the president of the United States can bully the chair of the Federal Reserve. You go around bullying the chair of the Federal Reserve, putting pressure on the Fed to lower interest rates. What are the markets going to do? The markets are going to say, wait a minute, now things are shaky in this country. You can't rely on the stability of the Federal Reserve. And that's the whole ball game right there, folks. You cannot have the entire global financial market community concerned about whether or not the United States is on steady ground. I mean, that talk about unintended consequences. They're just going to start flying left and right at that point. And so, because and you listen to his trade advisors. There was one who was on the news over the weekend on one of the Sunday talk shows saying, tariffs, here and tariffs there can have an effect. Yes, no question about it. Presidents have used tariffs in the past, but usually they're strategically targeted in a way that it goes after specific industries when actors like China are out of control and they are, engaging in unfair trade practices. Yes, in those kinds of circumstances, a president of the United States can slap a tariff on certain products coming in to see if you can correct the behavior of the Chinese or so on. You don't do these blanket, sort of widespread tariffs that are don't really have any kind of precision because of all of these unintended consequences that can play out.
See, I just wish that the DNC, including Jim Martin now, who's going to be running the messaging, would turn around and just explain to the American people that
Yeah.
time is legitimate, right? If you're not born and then the following day you're 100 years of age. Just because you say that by slapping the tariffs on, we're going to bring manufacturing back to America, including, I want to see all the cars manufactured in America. Well, that's great if you could snap your finger and you have a magic wand for it, but it takes years to build a facility within which to do it. So in the interim, what ends up happening? The American people suffer. Jim Acosta, thank you, my brother. Thank you, my friend,
Oh,
for
you're welcome.
joining me. Right?
Good talking to you.
We're all a little bit smarter today. Thanks to you. And you keep doing
Yeah, I appreciate
you,
it.
because you're really helping to keep the message out there and to hold this administration. And I don't just mean Trump, by the way. I'm talking about all of these new members of the cabinet and those that are surrounding him. You still continue to hold them to account. So thank you for that.
You got to do it. Yeah, you bet, Michael. Anytime. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, pal.